have the supervisor of our programs, Jeremy Hay, and we have our secretary, Katarina Stevenson, and our administrative or program administrator is Starla Walter. And we also have Dave Graves with us, who is another area engineer. We do have Josh Aiden, but he is unable to attend today. He's our other area engineer. And I think, did I say Starla? Yep, Starla. And then we have Brad Laskowski. He is our enforcement specialist. So we will probably all chip in with a couple of topics that we may have, but I'm going to start it off with Jeremy just to give you some maybe updates, EGLE updates, and some EGLE insight.
Sure. Thanks, Karen. And thanks all of you for finding time to attend. We are going to record this session and we will post it to our private YouTube channel and share that link with everybody if you have colleagues that were unable to attend today. But yeah, as Karen said, it's intended to be informal and kind of capture any questions or concerns that you may have as you're starting to get out and conduct pool inspections this year, or have already done some of the indoor ones this year. But general updates, our program and our division continue to work on our new IT system updates. We're working through some modules right now related to inspections. We hope to have a little bit better functionality there and potentially the ability to conduct an inspection out in the field electronically. I know some of the health departments already have their own IT systems that allow them to do that with a very similar inspection report form to the paper copy that we also provide. We had the updates to our statute last year for the allowance of swim up bars. Karen has been working on our first official submittal for a swim up bar, and it's actually a modification to a newer pool that was partially constructed or maybe potentially even fully constructed, but never went through the initial inspection or initial licensure process to open and operate. So we're still kind of learning things there. We've made connections with some resources at the Department of Licensing and Regulatory Affairs, and Michigan Liquor Control Commission. So we knew who to provide copies of those construction permits as they're issued to. So we're, again, trying to work through that process, and kind of related to that statute update will be the need for us to update our administrative rules. So we understand that process internally. EGLE uses a stakeholder driven process. So some of the first steps for us are to start engaging stakeholders, talk about the needed updates, start putting together drafts, documents like that, and then kind of engage the formal process of updating our rules. And that starts with a request for rulemaking. There's several reviewing or approval agencies that we work with. Joint Committee on Administrative Rules, which consists of both state representatives and senators and some other staff that kind of help make sure the language makes sense, and they're not hearing any concerns or issues from their constituents. And that's part of why we start the whole process with stakeholders, to make sure that from the regulatory side, everybody's comfortable with updates, and the affected parties as well. And then all of our service providers, pool contractors, designers, that type of thing. So we're trying to identify the resources to start that process. But those were kind of the general updates that I had. As questions come up, I'm happy to jump in and provide my perspective, if there's questions that maybe our engineers or program staff don't have a direct answer for. But thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Jeremy. So with that, so yeah, I just wanted to mention too a couple things. Again, we're just doing 1 hour today. If we need more time, we can set these up again and do them in just small blocks to answer questions. But for now, today we'll have an hour. I have a couple topics that I'll bring up. Again, jump in at any time, either unmute or if you want to put it in the chat. We'll monitor that. But one of the things I did want to mention is to always make sure you go to our website for updated forms and documents. That's where we will house everything that is always the most current, especially the Acton rules now has the swim up bar information in it. So make sure you're aware of that. Even our inspection forms or applications, sometimes the fees change. That's where all of the updated information will be. One other item I just want to bring up, and this is just going to be random. We're kind of going to bounce all over just various topics, things that I see when I'm looking at either plan reviews or seeing some inspections. I do get a little bit of confusion on when an inspection is completed and it's not approved. I don't know if all of you are in the understanding of assuring that you make a closure report form as well to go alongside of that inspection. That closure report is more of a valid document that actually indicates that their pool should be closed, and that it provides a timeline for them that they need to actually reach out to the health department for a reinspection in order to open it. So it actually provides that documentation so that if they don't comply with anything and may open, we actually have some enforcement action behind it because it is documented then on that form. So I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that, that process basically. I don't know at this point. I'll probably throw it over. I know Starla had a topic, so I'm going to roll it over to her so you're not listening to me all the time. You're muted, Starla.
I forgot. I just wanted to go over the initial inspection process. There seems to be a little confusion over that. When the facility is close to having the construction completed or it is completed, they are instructed to call me, email me, and then I have to send them a form to fill out. And then that way that captures all of their billing and contact information that gets entered into my EDWIS. And then they get the initial fee invoice. And once that comes back to me and it's paid, I will contact the inspector and let them know that it's paid. And then the facility will contact that inspector and arrange for the initial inspection. We've had a few times where the inspection's been done ahead of time before the invoice. And so then I have a hard time trying to find out who to send that invoice to. And then they're kind of confused on why they've got the inspection already and now they've got to pay this invoice. So I have a hard time getting payment for that. So just remember that you will hear from me when that payment is made and then that inspection can be scheduled. And the other thing is when submitting inspection reports in the submission queue, just be very careful on attaching that to the correct facility. I've seen a few lately that they've been attached to maybe a Baymont Inn in a different county, but it was a Baymont Inn. So I just ask that everyone be careful with that because sometimes we might not catch that right off the bat. And just one more thing, we are in the beginning phases of sending out enforcement letters to the delinquent facilities who have not paid between 2019 and 2022. Right now, we have about 88 facilities. And like I said, this is the beginning phase. I'm not sure what the letters even look like yet. Brad and I are working together to formulate that. You will get a copy of those once they go out. And I'm not sure, maybe in the next month, they'll go out, but I'll keep you all posted. And that is all I have.
Thanks, Darla. I do see a question in the chat about those inspectors that do initial inspections, the initial construction inspection, if a closing order should follow up with if there were violations. Not for that, because at the initial inspection, they're not open yet. So there's no need for a closure. That initial inspection, if it's shown not approved, they're not opening. It's not necessary for a closure order on those. They aren't even issued a license yet at that point. So not for those initial construction inspections.
Yeah, and Karen, I'll jump in. There was another question in the chat, and I realize some folks are joining us on the phone, so are maybe not able to read it. But first question we got was, are you considering adopting the Model Aquatic Health Code or portions of it when our administrative rules are updated? And yes, we're kind of looking at that. The Model Aquatic Health Code is a group kind of led by the CDC that addresses aquatic venues and kind of the health and safety, very similar to what our rules cover. Some of their rules go very in depth and kind of fill in some of the gray areas or areas that maybe aren't addressed in our current set of administrative rules. So we do currently use that as kind of a resource when we have unique issues or items that come up for our review or questions on how to operate or design questions even. So we've kind of looked at that. We're not sure exactly how that would work with Michigan law and how our administrative rules work, but yes, we're certainly hoping that we would be able to do that, whether it's the full Model Aquatic Health Code or portions of it. That way, as the code's updated, then our reference would point to that most recent update of the Model Aquatic Health Code. Would save us a lot of time and effort and energy to maintain our rule set for sure.
Yeah, and then a follow-up again on the inspection process, the initial construction inspection. Someone inquired on, at an initial inspection, if they did already open, but didn't get a license and they were operating, yes, I would say issue that closure if they're operating without, the initial inspection and or initial license, then yes. And if you have questions on that, you can always just call us, email us, whatever. And if you have a specific question that may be unique, but that would be an instance to accompany a closure order. Dave, I'm going to throw it at you. See if you have anything you wanted to bring up.
Yeah, the biggest thing I wanted to reiterate that you said is we have a new staff member, new engineer, Josh Aiden, and we have always broken up the state into counties. So each one of us as engineers would have a specific county. And so now we have 3 of us to divide and conquer. So in that, those staff responsibility areas are, there's a form on our website that would show. So make sure you check into that to make sure who your engineer person is that is responsible in your county. And also those responsible areas, we have we've made those the same for campgrounds too. So if you're the engineer on a specific county for pools, you're going to be for campgrounds too. So that's just one thing I wanted to make sure to highlight, and we're excited to have Josh on board and have 3 engineers. I think he's doing some actual training today, so he couldn't join us.
So with that, I'll just bring up a couple topics. Unless Jeremy, you have something you wanted to add to that?
No, I was just gonna, I see Stacy put a question in about electronic inspection report forms. We do have several health departments right now that utilize their in-house IT system to generate an inspection report form, and no, they don't need to be identical to the EGLE branded inspection report form, but as long as that same information is captured. And as you're working with your IT vendor or in-house to develop that form, if you want to share copies of it with us, just to make sure that you're capturing, in fact, all that same information, we have provided that service to other health departments as they work on that development, just to be certain that all the information is there and we're not going to have any concerns or issues with the formatting. So please utilize that. Go ahead and send us a draft, or as you're working through it, we'll be happy to review it.
Okay, I'll jump in with another topic to throw out there. So I've gotten a lot of questions about foot sprays versus poolside showers. There are a lot of pools out there that still have foot sprays. Those were approved probably prior to, I'm guessing, mid to late 80s potentially. Back in that era, the rules did not specify a poolside shower. They specifically stated the need for a foot spray. So fast forward, our updates eliminated the requirement for a foot spray, but required the poolside shower. So I don't want to say grandfathered, because we don't usually say anything's grandfathered in. They were just approved during the time frame of when a foot spray was required. So for those locations, we've allowed them to maintain that foot spray until they complete an upgrade on the decking area or in that vicinity to accommodate that shower. Many times where the foot spray is located, they can easily just convert that into a shower head. So it's very easy to do so. However, I don't believe foot sprays require tempered water, whereas the poolside shower does require tempered water. So sometimes that can be a little glitch in that process of converting it over. That's kind of the status on the foot spray versus not. I don't know if Brad, as our enforcement person, has anything to add on the enforcement end of things. Brad, do you have anything you wanted to input on your end?
As far as just general enforcement?
Yep, just generally.
Update? Okay.
Yeah, yep, sure.
Yep, I'm, like Starla said, we're working on that letter that's going to go out. We're in the draft process of that letter. And then I'm also working on an SOP for how we're going to conduct enforcement at the state level. That's in a draft as well. So everything's kind of in a draft stage. We're building it and trying to get some structure to how we handle pool enforcement in the future.
And I just wanted to add too that we've been happy to have Brad on board, because enforcement is very time consuming. A lot of times we just didn't have the resources to fully assist in the enforcement actions of a lot of facilities. So this has really helped us a lot to have a better handle on enforcement and being able to follow through with needed enforcement. So Brad's been a big help for us for sure. One thing I did want to mention as well, so flow rates at pools, I get comments or questions, inquiries of what should the flow rate at a specific pool be? Or I notice when an inspection comes in, the flow rate is just not there, left blank, a line through it, and not really any comment or follow-up. The flow rate is important to assure and determine that you're turning over the pool in the required time frame. So depending on when the pool was approved, it may have been approved at an 8-hour turnover rate or the current 6-hour turnover rate. So the flow rates may not, be exactly what you think if it's an older pool under an 8-hour turnover rate. However, you should have a handle on what that minimum flow rate should be. So when you're going into a facility, you should know what that flow meter should be reading. Also, there's a lot of problems with flow meters, so that makes it difficult, especially the blue-white flow meters that have the little bobber float. A lot of times, any type of particle, dirt, anything can stick on that, and so then that flow meter is not functioning properly. So they do require a lot of maintenance, especially if it's located before the filter. It doesn't get the ability for that filter to filter out some of the particles, and it is approvable to be located before the filter. So that's one thing that you just want to be cognizant of, is to just make sure you have that flow rate, or get them to replace the flow meter or clean the flow meter. I know I always recommend the new Flovis flow meters. They don't have the maintenance headaches that a blue-white or those bobber flow meters have. They're not susceptible to the dirt particles. And they also have less restrictions on their location. They can be closer to an elbow. They're not susceptible to the turbulence of elbows and short runs on piping. So you can place them in some tricky piping areas more so than a blue-white flow meter. So that's just one thing I wanted to bring up. I don't know.
Along those lines, Karen, with the flow rate and the flow meter and stuff, a lot of times you might not know exactly what the required flow rate is, and there's a couple different rules that govern the flow rate. One, of course, is the turnover, so the water has to be turned over in a certain hour based on the type of pool it is. So just a swimming pool, it's a 6-hour turnover. So you got to know the volume of your pool, and then you could calculate it that way. But there's another rule that governs the turnover, and it's for skimmers. So you need 37.5 gallons per minute per skimmer also. So that they have to meet both of those. So if you walk into a regular like a motel pool and it has 2 skimmers, it's likely going to be that 37.5 gallons a minute times 2, so 75 gallons a minute is an easy way to calculate that. But that flow rate has to meet both of those rules.
Thanks,
I think we
Sam.
had a couple. Yeah, there's a couple of questions on there about consumption of alcohol in the swimming pool. Yeah, so what's that new legislation that it was put right into the actual act portion, because didn't go through the rulemaking process, so it's in the act. So it does state that consumption of alcohol is not allowed in swimming pools. So there's in the rules it states that. So there is they don't meet up. They're in violation of each other. So right now we've just had that one that's applied for this, and there's right in the rule, there's right in the act, there's some additional requirements for that. So there's, I don't know, Jeremy, if you want to clean that up a little. Yeah.
Sure. No, and yeah, and it's very confusing. And we tried to provide the FAQ without, writing a novel there of all the things that need to take place. But basically, what the revision to the statute says is that, and I tried to put the first portion of that new section in the chat. Basically, it says you still can't prepare, serve, consume alcoholic beverages or food within the pool unless you go through a specific review and approval by the public swimming pool program to determine that you meet kind of these increased standards. And there's some discussion about the materials to be used, the turnover rate, secondary treatment, adding UV, not just having chlorine residual or bromine residual, lifeguard service. There's some operational things there as well. So it's not simply that the law allows it now. The law allows it now if you go through a specific construction permit review and approval from the public swimming pool program, and then there's also the license interactions with the food law and the Michigan Liquor Control Commission. So it's not just that anybody can grab a beer and go swim with it now. There's still some things that need to be reviewed and approved. Not saying that that's not happening at places, but it probably shouldn't be. So.
And just to clarify too, I mean, we call it the swim up bar, but it doesn't necessarily mean you have to actually have a constructed swim up bar where you see stools in that type of construction. In fact, the one I'm reviewing now does not, it just basically has a counter. So it's almost like you're going to the pool edge. However, it's got a recessed area behind that pool edge where the bar is located. So you're just walking up to it. So it's almost like as if you're walking up to the edge of the bar, but you're allowed to walk around in that pool now with food and alcohol once I issue the approval for it. But so you don't necessarily have to have an actual, full-fledged constructed table and chairs and things like that within the pool itself. It's just a matter of whether you're allowing the alcohol to be within the pool water body and or food. I'm looking at the chat. I'm going to back up a little bit. Someone had asked how much time we're giving operators to change from the foot spray to the poolside shower. Just to clarify that, it's not really a timeline. If the pool was approved with a foot spray at the time, at any point when they approach us to do modifications to the pool deck, that's when we would indicate the poolside shower would be converted to. So it's not really a timeline we give. It's up to them when they decide they're going to do updates. The turnover rate for a spa is 1 hour. If you look in the beginning of the rule book, I don't have the rule handy. There is a list of the turnovers for wading pools, spa pools, swimming pools. And so a spa is 1 hour. A splash pad is half hour. Is that right? Yeah, half hour. So it varies. And then we have that kind of generic activity pool. Sometimes that's kind of a culmination of a couple different types of pools that you may see at a YMCA, and that we kind of review on a case by case and try to determine what the turnover would be, because it may have a splash pad implemented with a lap pool. So you can't really expect a lap pool to turn over in a half hour. So we may split the difference and figure out what the best course of action is, and that pool may have a 4 hour. So that's kind of the determination of turnover rates. Okay, so if a pool does have a low flow, which is below required turnover, are there any suggestions we can give the pool operator, or if it could, or should they just call a pool service to work on the issue? Yeah, there can be many factors involved. However, also, there's the flow control valve after the pump. So that might be just an easy start to determine, I guess there's a couple easy starts to determine where that valve is low, if that valve is closed or mostly closed, that could be a factor. Also, the type of filter they have, maybe their filter needs to be backwashed because it's so dirty, it's causing that flow to reduce and be constricted. So you can ask when they last backwashed. It could be a need for that. And depending on the gauge of their filter, sometimes the gauge actually shows the range of where it just specifically states backwash needed. Otherwise, you may have to look at the inlet outlet pressure and know what a clean filter requires, or what pressures that clean filter has, to know if that pressure has increased enough to warrant a backwash. So those are a couple easy factors to first look at that they may not have to have the expense of a pool contractor come in initially, then some pointers you may be able to give them. I don't know, Dave, if you have any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, depending on the type of filter too. If it's a cartridge filter, they might need to clean those cartridges or replace them. And I'm not sure if you mentioned it, but also the pump, the pump might have some age on it and it's just not as efficient. The motor could be going out. So yeah, it's valving first, pump, and well, I'd say first would be filter, filter backwash, make sure the filter's clean and operating properly. But if they can try those things first and they still can't get it, then, it really, it isn't on the health department really to solve those problems. You can help and coordinate and try to give advice, but yeah, ultimately they'll have to take responsibility for that if they need to contact a pool professional. Anything else in the
Yeah, does somebody have that color-coded inspection form? So we do have an older inspection form that we have just color-coded. It's basically a guidance. It's not really hard and fast. They're color-coded in yellow, green, and red. Green meaning that it would, even if there was an issue, it would warrant an approved inspection. Yellow, it could be conditional. If you have a bunch of yellows, that could escalate it to a not approved. And then the items that were highlighted in red would mean that they're really of high importance that would warrant a not approved. But again, if you have multiple greens, that could still add up to a conditional. It's just basically a rule of thumb guidance of what maybe is most important to least important is for health and safety. But also historically, if year after year you note a green item on that inspection form, it could escalate to a yellow or a red just because they're not addressing it. So again, it's kind of your basically for you to kind of gauge and look at the history of the facility and determine how responsive that facility is. And if they just are not responding, you can then escalate any of those to a yellow or red.
Yeah, I think that guidance form, it is a guidance form. And I think that's why it's not really out there available for everyone to look at, because it could be misconstrued. I think, it's just meant to say these are the things that we think are more important or less important. So I think that people could use it incorrectly maybe and say, oh, this is red. I need to shut the pool down immediately. So it's more for guidance. And Megan, I definitely, I can email that to you if you don't have it, if you need it. So no problem.
Yeah, and we can share it when we send kind of the follow-up email with a link to the recording as well. We can attach that document or PDF of it.
So there's a question in regard to sun shelves. So do they need to meet certain requirements, and are there any concerns? So yes, when we receive applications for pools that have sun shelves, they have to have a stairway entry into the main body of the pool. The rules right now don't specifically speak to the construction of a sun shelf, but we do have specifics on floor slopes. And then there's a caveat about special purpose pools. So we don't allow drop-offs. We do have some of those in therapy pools, but they're specifically have oversight, and it's usually a therapist and the patient. Whereas most of these sun shelves I typically see them at apartments or condos. So there is no oversight, but we do require a stair entry for the full length. There should be no drop-offs. Depths, they vary. I've seen, 6 inches to maybe 18 inches on those sun shelves. There are floor returns that we look for in there so that they do have water circulation. Try and think of anything else other than that. I know many states they don't allow sun shelves at all. And I have seen a couple states that allow the drop offs. So it varies widely across the country. But at this point, we don't have a problem with sun shelves, but just make sure that they have the stairway entry. I don't know if I missed anything.
Yeah, one thing that we, from a inspection point of view, if you have a pool with a sun shelf and they do have those floor returns, a lot of these sun shelves, they want to put like loungers in there, some chairs, and just want to make sure that those aren't obstructing those floor inlets. Also, just something to be aware of for inspection. But yeah, the biggest thing is with the sun shelf has to have the stairway. It can't just be a straight drop off is the biggest thing.
So a question came in that when a pool is marked conditional on the inspection, is there a maximum time frame to complete the follow-up? So maximum, I would say the maximum would be the next routine inspection. That typically is, if it's depending on what the issue is, if it's something that's minor, maybe, I don't even know what one to throw out, but something that doesn't affect anything that would be a safety issue or a water quality issue, something like that, that you can wait to follow up at the next routine. I have seen that, and it just means that their license will show that it has a condition, and then the next year's inspection, it would be removed if that's been corrected. However, if it's something that needs to be addressed sooner than that, that could create a problem if it wasn't addressed in a timely fashion, then you would want to mark, a logical, I guess, an agreeable and logical and reasonable time frame to correct that. So that's something that is very subjective, and it can be on how responsive you and the type of rapport you may have with that facility. If they're always willing to work with you, and they say, hey, this is on back order, I can get one, but it's going to take me 3 months. Your follow-up may be in 3 months. And with the follow-up, I wanted to mention too that follow-up doesn't always mean you physically have to go there for that follow-up. If it's a matter of their flow meter was dirty and they couldn't get to cleaning it or replacing it while you were there, they can take a video clip, show you a picture of what the flow rate is, and that they actually had cleaned or replaced the flow meter. That's more than sufficient. And then you can just note on an inspection form that you received information or confirmation via email and submit that as your follow-up. So it doesn't always necessarily mean you have to make a physical visit, depending on what it is that you may need to verify.
That's a good answer, Karen. I would have just said it depends.
Sorry, I was long-winded, maybe.
No, it was really good, but you really got to use your judgment. You can't, it's not all encompassing to say it's conditional, ergo, I need to do this. You have to take all those factors into account for those follow-ups. I think there's a question for Starla in there about licensing processes.
Yeah, maybe Kat and
maybe,
Starla.
Oh yeah, maybe Jeremy gets it. I don't know.
No, I'll let Kat and Starla answer it.
I thought that was going to be Jeremy's question, actually. Yeah, this wasn't built into my EDWIS for this year. So what I have told some health departments is when you get ready to do an inspection, if you want to know whether or not they have a license, you can email Kat or I, and we can email you that license or let you know that that license has been issued. Kat was also sending out a list of facilities in your county that the license was issued on or it was rejected on. And right now, that's the best we have. Eventually, you'll be able to go into my EDWIS and you'll be able to see if there's a license, and if you need to print one off for your files, if that's the way you want to do it, you'll be able to do that, I believe. But right now, this is what we have. So sorry about that, but we'll work with you.
Yeah, and I tried to mention some of the updates that are hopefully coming soon for my EDWIS to start the meeting off. But yeah, as we were developing the public swimming pool modules for our IT system, we were told that local health departments would be coming into the system later that same calendar year. So we unfortunately didn't talk about the need for local health department copies. We were under the assumption that, all right, well, next licensing year, which is 2023, local health departments will have access to all their entities within their county or jurisdiction if they're a district health department or city for City of Detroit, and be able to see the real-time licensing status, grab a copy of that license if they wanted to add it to their filing system, electronically or hard copies. So we're kind of still in that situation where we can provide them to you, but it's very very manual process right now. We don't have the ability to pull them all for one individual county and get them printed off or converted to PDF and sent to you. So yeah, it's really an unfortunate situation, and we're hopeful that local health departments will be gaining access here soon. So that's been prioritized.
There's a question about clarification on email follow-ups for an inspection. Is it required an updated follow-up inspection form, or can this wait until the next routine? So if that was the only item on the follow-up, if there's additional follow-up items, then I would just wait and do them all at once to make sure that all the items were corrected as they should be, unless there was just the items, or let me back up. If all the items that were emailed are what you constituted as issues and that email covered it, then yes, a follow-up inspection form should be submitted for that. But I wouldn't piecemeal it and say, we still have outstanding items. I would wait till you've gathered all your items and then submit that follow-up. Hopefully that made sense. I don't see anything else in the chat, so I'm going to throw just another item out there. So entrances are self-closing, latching, and locking. Always been there, always has been from day one in the pool rules. I get questions a lot on the types of entrances. This is required. Not only should they self-close, they should latch, so nobody can just lean on it and the door opens. And then they have to have a means to lock, so that when that pool enclosure is closed or the swimming hours are no longer, that enclosure has to be able to prevent access. So I do know in some jurisdictions there's been some conflict with building codes as far as emergency egress, and we've addressed those on a case-by-case basis. Most times it's a panic bar to an exit type thing. I do know there was some other maybe unique instances, but as a whole, there just has to be a means to make sure that there's, any unwanted access is prevented, whether it's by a small child or just, during closed hours, that type of thing.
Yeah, enclosure security is really a top priority, and as Karen mentioned, the entrances latching, locking, self-closing, but also the whole enclosure itself. You want to make sure is secure, that all the fencing is in place, whatever kind of barrier they have, it's non-climbable, something hasn't been pushed over or open. So a lot of the drownings that we see or that happen at pools is because of a a lack of security in the enclosure. So you definitely want, that's one of those red items on the on that guidance form. You want to make sure that that's definitely a priority when you're inspecting.
And again, I've had questions on sliding glass doors for entrances. It does not meet the self-closing, latching, locking requirements. So that's the reason for not having sliders allowed as an entrance point to the enclosure. There is a question that I think is a Starla one. Do indoor pool inspections need to be completed by a certain date?
I think we go to 9:30. So they all have to be done by the end of the fiscal year.
Yeah, and I think that's a remnant from the contract that we have with each of your local health departments. There was always a suggestion to do the indoor, the year-round operating pools kind of early, January, February, March, April, and then as the outdoor pools open, the seasonal pools open, then to conduct those inspections. And then the school pools, obviously you need to catch those while they're open, either in the winter, spring, or later in the fall. But yeah, I think we've kind of gone away from those scheduling suggestions, and we should probably update the contract language to pull some of those suggestions out of there. There's really no hard and firm requirement to do any inspections other than, we need it to be done by the fiscal, within the calendar year. The suggestion is to get them done by the end of our fiscal year, which is September 30th, as Starla stated.
Can I add one more thing? Please keep in mind that a approved or conditional inspection can release that next year's license. So if we have, well, no inspection, that license doesn't get released, but the follow-ups are awesome to get in on time that will release that, because we've done so well this year. We've got so many licenses out there. So there's just a few that we didn't receive the inspection report. I've been getting the inspection reports actually from the facilities. So they really want their license on time. So just keep that in mind, that, the approved and conditionals can release that license. So if you are holding back maybe for a follow-up, hopefully you can get it in the same year. I don't know. I know they close early being in Michigan, but just keep that in mind.
There's a question on giving some insight into the enforcement policy that we're developing.
Yep.
Jeremy or Brad, got that?
I can take that one. Yeah, the pool SOP has been kind of backburnered. We've been working on our campground and our well construction SOPs, and those have been taking a lot of the SOP designs time. But I will say that what I'm looking at doing and what my overarching goal is to have health department kind of what we're looking for when we need to proceed with an enforcement case. So what documentation you'll provide to us, and I'm envisioning having a packet that we can provide you guys and say, you fill out this packet and we'll look at it as an enforcement referral, and that'll help communicate all the documentation to us. And then I want to put out a document that shows clearly and concisely EGLE's next steps as we kind of proceed. Now, it's hard to say this is a concrete flow chart because there's so many decision-making points, but it'll provide a good guideline. There's, they suddenly come into enforcement or into compliance because the enforcement started ramping up and your flow chart goes awry. But just some kind of structure so that you understand what we're doing at the EGLE level. And then I'll touch on what our escalated referrals past me go to. So that'll be either a criminal investigation or attorney general civil suit.
Yeah, and it'll likely be pretty lean, you know, not contain a ton of detail, just because we expect when there is a, you know, an issue with a pool operator or owner or situation relating to a public swimming pool, that we're going to be receiving those inspection reports. And, you know, Dave, Karen, or Josh maybe asked a few questions about a situation as kind of the area engineer covering that area. So we'll be most likely familiar with the situation and what's going on, and kind of Brad's SOP, standard operating procedure, will be just kind of, you know, how that handoff occurs between local health department efforts to gain compliance, and if you're not seeing any traction or any corrections, you know, what's needed to hand that off to us. You know, have you issued a closing order, and are they violating that, or are, you know, you continuing to see water quality issues and they're just not understanding it? You know, how do you hand that off to us, and kind of what our steps are going to be? So yeah, I think, as Brad mentioned, maybe some additional documents or resources will be attached to that SOP, but yeah, we expect that each case will be pretty unique and require some involvement between our agencies to figure out and move forward on.
There's a question in regard to, okay, I receive a lot of questions and comments at the initial inspections on the max water temperature, which is 110 degrees for showers and bathhouse sinks. The pool owners, operators would like to have a higher max water temperature, which would still be below the scalding risk allowed in the revised pool rules. Awesome comment, and yes, we're tied to the 110 right now because it's specifically stated in the pool rules. So again, there's many updates that are needed in our pool rules. So that's a great comment, and one that we would, you know, look at when we can open these up and reevaluate them.
Yeah,
Anybody
I believe it's 120 degrees, and is it the plumbing code? Is that where it varies? And I think campgrounds actually references maybe 120 degrees within their rule set. So yeah, we have seen and noticed the discrepancies, and we'll try to square those up for sure.
So we have about 6 minutes left for today. Do either of you guys have anything to add on any topic?
Just an inspection related thing that I see that comes up a lot is regarding skimmers and the weird door that seems to be missing very often. You know, without that door in the weir of the skimmer, the skimmer is not functioning properly. So the purposes of that door is when the water goes over it, it breaks that surface tension. So then the debris particles in there will be going to the basket. So I know that they get broken and misplaced, and you get the operator might say, "Oh, I can't keep it there. It gets vandalized or whatever." But it's something that you should really look at when you're doing an inspection to make sure that they're there. And if they're not there, they need to rectify that. And there's also a floating basket system that would suffice. And I think a lot of new pools go with that system. So the basket that actually goes in the skimmer has a portion that comes up and floats. And so when the water goes over there, it does the same thing. So just an inspection thing to be aware of. And one other thing I'll mention too, just random inspection stuff. If we don't have any other questions, is about the test kits. And the question of using the test strips, the dipping test strips, comes up often. And we don't prohibit the use of those, but it is required to use an actual DPD test kit to get your actual readings. If the operator wants to use those the strips just to get a quick check to see where they are with their disinfectant or their pH, that's fine. But to document that on the operational report form, we do need the DPD test kit. And along those same lines, you see the OTO kits all the time. They're the ones that they're yellow. When you put the reagents in, it turns yellow, and that just calculates the total combined chlorine. So you don't know what the free chlorine is with those. So that's why you need the DPD test kit. And reagents too. You want to make sure that their reagents are up to date. They're not, because those have an expiration date on them. So to check those. And also, if you have some question about the operator at any particular facility, if you have them do the test for you when you're there, or to double check that way, it's a good way just to verify of their ability to actually operate the pool.
Okay, I don't see any more questions in the chat, and we're approaching our hour, so I'm going to respect everybody's time. Oh, we may have one quick one in here. Here's the amount of lines. So it's in regard to the amount of lines for the inspection remarks being small. We have those supplemental forms that are full page. It's again trying to cut back to the forms being on one page. There's just so much information, and so putting it into one page really condenses any additional room. So you're writing in the margins or next to the line item. Again, all I can suggest at this time is the supplemental pages to be used for an additional space for writing more comments at this point until we become more electronic. That's kind of what we're restricted to at this point. So with that, I think we're at our time. If you have any feedback, provide us. If you found this helpful, we can do this again. We can do it for a half hour. We can do it on a specific topic. So if you have any feedback, please provide that to any of us. Jeremy, I don't know if you have anything to wrap up.
No, I see, if additional questions show up in the chat, we'll certainly address those, and yeah, we'll provide an email back to everybody through the channels that we shared the details for this session with, and we can include that link to the recording, provide that annotated or colored inspection report form, and any additional questions that we need to provide or links to information on our website with that. So, but yeah, thank you all for your time today. And Kat, I think you can go ahead and stop the recording.